Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of Divrei Hayomim Aleph, the first book of Chronicles. We are about to study chapter 21. In the previous chapters, we read of the military successes of David and his forces and his ability to consolidate control over to unify the kingdom of Israel under his leadership and to quell and pacify all of the enemies that surrounded the land of Israel and beginning to build up the wealth and security in the nation of Israel. So once all of these other enemy nations have been subdued, immediately things don't go so well. David makes a mistake, and we're about to read of a mistake that he makes. Now, as I pointed out in previous podcasts, the book of Chronicles does not focus very much at all on David's shortcomings. It idolizes him and makes him into a hero and pretty much only talks about his successes and what he's done right and well. This is the one exception to that where it mentions a mistake, and we can speculate a little as we study why the chronicler here chose to mention this particular error that David had made, as opposed to the many of David's shortcomings that are discussed in great detail in the book of Samuel, as opposed to this one. Remember, here again, the context, the purpose of the book of Chronicles is to inspire the people, to give them a sense of history, to give them a sense of their past heroes, to inspire them to work hard and together to build and rebuild the new nation of Israel in the second time around in the Second Temple period. But for some reason, this story, we have to look at it in that context. This error that David made, the chronicler felt was important for the people to read about and remember. So, Vayamod Satan al Yisrael, in a very unusual passage, we mention the Satan stood over Israel. Now, this is not common. This is one of the very few places where this figure or this idea of Satan is mentioned at all in Tanakh. We together recently studied in this podcast the book of Eo, the book of Job, which is one of those places. And here is another one of those places. And immediately one gets the sense and idea that Satan is um, this inclination of selfishness, of arrogance, which comes about after someone is successful. So David has been incredibly successful. We emphasize his humility before God and so on. But then even David was susceptible to this a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of feeling a little bit overconfident in himself and his abilities. So Vayoses es David, and he, that Satan, seduced or convinced David, limnos es Yisrael, to count the people of Israel. Now, there are many, many, many times where the armies of Israel are counted. The people are counted in how many troops, how many soldiers, over and over again. That does not seem to be a problem or an issue. However, we find that throughout Tanakh. But over here specifically, it's after the wars. It's when the people are at peace that David asks for an accounting. Now, why would a king do that? And one gets the sense that it's almost like a matter of pride. And we talked about this at length when the same incident was discussed in the book of Samuel. And we identified the particular sin here as a sin of arrogance. It's David wanted to count the people to see how big of a nation he is now the king over, how great they are, and possibly how much he can tax them for, and so on. Like, what's our power? How big are we? So, counting for that purpose has no practical need. It's only a need to help him stroke his ego. And this then becomes the source of his mistake. So, Vayomer David el Yoav. And David said to Yoav, his general, V'el Sarei Ha'am, and to the other officers of the nation, Lechu sifru et Yisrael, go and count all the people of Israel, mi Be'ersheva v'ad Dan, from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north, v'haviu Eli, and bring the numbers to me, v'eda et misparam, so I should know their numbers. Vayomer Yoav, and Yoav answered. Yoav immediately sensed and understood that this was a mistake. So he said, Yosef Adonai alamo kahei mea pa'amim. May God add to his nation 100 times what the numbers are now. In other words, he immediately refers to it as God's nation, not your nation, right? Halo Adoni HaMelech kulam la'adoni la'avodim. Certainly, king, right, my lord the king. They are all servants of yours. So lama yivakesh zos adoni. Why does the master want to do something like this? Lama yiyel ashmoli Israel. Why should this then become a source of guilt for the people of Israel? Yoav immediately sensed that this came from a hint of arrogance, a hint of self um, satisfaction, I guess, that David had, now that he's built this kingdom. And Yoav said, "This is a mistake. This is an error. You're going down the wrong path." Udvar HaMelech chazak al Yoav, but the king was strong-armed. Yoav, he commanded him in a strong way. Vayetze Yoav yisalech b'chol Yisrael. So Yoav had to do what his master, the king, bid him to do. So he went by Yavo Yerushalayim, and he came back to Jerusalem. Vayitain Yoav et mispar mifkad ha'amel David, and Yoav then gave the number of the people that had been counted to David. Vayihi chol Yisrael, and all the people of Israel, elef alafim ume'ah, which adds up to 1,000 thousands, ume'ah elef, and another 100,000. So that's 1,100,000 people, shalef cherav, who can draw a sword. So presumably men of fighting age. Yehuda, and among the people of Yehuda, Arba Meos Veshivim Elef, there were 470,000 Sholef Charev, men of military age. So you have already here we see a hint of the division between Israel, everyone else, and Judah, which eventually became two separate nations. Already here we see a hint of that. So the Levi uBinyamin, and the people of Levi and the people of Binyamin, right? Lo pakad b'socham, were not counted among them. Ki nit'av dvar hamelech et Yoav, right? Because Yoav just didn't finish it up because he was just sick of doing this. He was doing a task that he was commanded to do, and he could only do it because he had to up to a point, but then he stopped. So we don't know the full numbers, but these are the numbers that he got. And God did not like this. Israel, and he struck the people of Israel. Now, exactly how he struck them, we're going to find out in a moment. Now, so we have here Yoav doing what he was commanded to do, but not fully because he just got sick of it in the middle. And David asking him to do something which was inappropriate, which was a function of his pride, which led to a big mistake. Vayomer David el Elohim, and David said to God, Chatasi ma'od, I have sinned greatly, asher asisi es hadavar hazeh, that I have done this thing. David recognized and realized in part because maybe possibly because Yoav stopped in the middle, maybe the message got to him, and it did say that God struck Israel, so some kind of punishment had begun to occur already. David realized, oh no, I made a mistake. And we're going to see in a minute that David is going to recognize that as a king, when he makes a mistake, the people suffer, that the responsibility of leadership is extremely important. So Asher Asisi Asadavar Zeh, that I did this thing, Ve'ato ha'averno et avon avdecha ki niskalti mi'od. Please forgive the sin that your servant has done because I have done something very foolish. God did not answer David directly, but he answered him through the prophet God. And God was David's prophet, or David's seer. Jose would be more accurately translated as a seer, S-E-E-R. Lech v'dibarta el David lemar, go speak to David and tell him as follows. Ko amar Adonai, so says God, shalosh ani noteh elecha. There are three options that I am giving you. B'char locha achas mehena v'yaselach. Choose one of them, and I will do them. This is a bargain, a choice, which is none of us would want to have to choose. All three are not good options. Vayavo God el David, so God came to David. Vayomer lo ko amar Adonai kabelach. This is what God said. You make the choice, and these are the three choices. Im shalosh onim ra'av, Do you want 3 years of famine? V'im shlosha chadashim nispeh mipnei tzarecha v'cherev oivecha lemaseges, or do you want to have 3 months where your enemies overpower you and the swords of your enemies, overtake you? V'im sheloshet yamim cherev Adonai, or 3 days where the sword of God, v'dever ba'aretz, and the plague would break out in the land, umalach Adonai, and then an agent of God, right? So this would be a power that you don't see. You don't see the famine like you see physically, the crops not coming, the rain not coming, or the enemy coming, but it's just something that you don't, it's not visible to the naked eye. The illness breaking out, mashchis b'chol gvul Yisrael, destroying throughout the lands of Israel. V'yator re'eh ma'ashiv et shochi davar. And now, think about this. What message should I bring back to God? So David is given these three choices. All are horrible choices. And David picks an interesting choice. Vayomer David el God. So David said to God, Sarli ma'od, I have a lot of pain from this, because David realizes that his mistakes are responsible for the death that is about to come. No matter what he chooses, he realizes that it was his mistake. Eplona v'yad Adonai, I would rather fall in the hands of God. I'd rather give the option to God, right? Ki rabim rachamav mod, because He has much mercy, uviyad adam al apol, and not to fall in the hands of human beings. In other words, I choose option three, the option in which a famine also puts the people at the mercy of those that surround them. They have to go to the nations around them to beg, to barter, to trade, to try to get food to eat. A war is certainly in the hands of human beings to help, I mean, to get peace, or to stop the war. But if it leave it in the hand of illness, maybe I could somehow mitigate this by prayer, by repentance, because God is great and mercy. I'd rather not fall into the hands of human beings. So this is what happened. Vayitain Adonai dever b'Yisrael, and God placed a plague among the people of Israel. Vayipol mi Yisrael shivim alef ish, and 70,000 people died in this plague. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. So Vayishlach Elohim malach l'Yerushalayim la'ashchisa, and God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. In other words, this angel it's a spiritual force. A plague is not something that people can see. Maybe nowadays we can see microbes and test for viruses, but in those days, this was an agent of God causing death, causing illness. And when the destruction happened, Ra Adonai vayinochem al ra, God saw the terrible suffering, and he changed his mind regarding the rest to complete this. Rather than allowing even more people to die, Vayomer l'malach hamashchis rav, and he told the angel of death, that's enough. Atah heref yadecha, hold back your hand. Umalach Adonai omed im goren ornon hayebusi. And the angel of God stopped when he reached the place of the granary of Arnon the Jebusite. On the granary of Arnon the Jebusite, we'll see soon, is the future location of the temple. And God said at that point, as the angel reached that point, as the plague reached that location, God stopped the plague and said, it's enough dying, enough suffering. One of the key lessons we need to learn of the story so far is the tremendous responsibility that a political leader has, that a king has. The decisions that a king makes based on his own arrogance leads to real death and real suffering among his subjects. And this responsibility, of course, is so relevant to this day. The decisions that a king, or in our days, whether it's a president or a prime minister or whatever, makes, leads to real death. And it's usually not the prime minister or the president that suffers physically. It's his people. It's the ones who he or she is responsible for. And this is the lesson that David is learning. When I make decisions based on my own arrogance, it's the people that suffer. So Vayisah David et einav, David raised his eyes, Vayaret malach Adonai, and he saw this vision of the angel of God, Omeid bein haaretz uvein hashamayim, standing between the heavens and the earth. V'charbo shlufa biyado, and he had the sword drawn in his hand, Netuya al Yerushalayim, spread out over Jerusalem. Just imagine David sees this pestilence, this plague spreading throughout the people, and he sees the city of Jerusalem about to succumb to the plague. The plague is reaching the walls of Jerusalem, and he, so to speak, sees the sword of the angel of death spread out over Jerusalem. He sees it coming closer and closer to the capital itself. Vayipol David v'azkenim mechusim basakim al pneihem. And David and the elders covered themselves in sackcloth and threw themselves down on their faces. Vayomer David el Elohim, and David said to God, Halo ani amarti limnos ba'am. I was the one who said that the people should be counted. Va'ani hu asher chatasi. It is I who sinned. V'horei aharei osi. It was the evil was done by me. Ve'ela hatzon asu. But these, the flock, the sheep, the people I'm responsible for, they didn't do anything wrong. Adonai Elohai, the Lord my God, Tihina yadcha biu bebeis avi. Punish me and my father's home, my family's home. But don't bring this plague upon your nation. So here you have this tremendous outpouring of grief from David, recognizing that he's responsible for the suffering that the people have undergone, and recognizing and saying to God, punish me, don't punish them, make me suffer. How different this is from leaders we see in front of us today in modern times, when leaders couldn't care less about the suffering caused to the people that are caused by the decisions, the reckless decisions and selfish decisions that they made, while they themselves and their own families are living the high life behind secure doors and fancy houses and fancy cars, while the decisions they make the people suffer. How different this attitude of David is, the attitude that he learned now, and the responsibility that he takes for the decisions that he made. This is the end of verse 17. We'll continue the chapter 21 in the next podcast, to see how David had to respond and did respond to this terrible tragedy, and how it eventually led to building something better. Thank you so much for studying this together with me. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 21 together, and of course, the rest of this entire book of Chronicles together. Have a wonderful day.